So our next event is Future Now, How India Can Become Vaccine Capital. With 160 global patents and more than 4 billion vaccines delivered globally, Bharat Biotech is currently developing India's first indigenous COVID-19 vaccine. Bharat Biotech is leading innovation to safeguard global public health. I now invite Dr. Raches Ella, Head of Business Development Advocacy, Project Lead for SARS-CoV-2 vaccine, to talk about how India can become vaccine capital. Over to you, sir.
Hi, good morning, Kirti, and thank you very much, IIT BHU, to invite me. I'm truly honored to be part of this webinar on the future of healthcare. And in my coming slides, I'll try to explain to the best possible extent as to how Bharat is changing the vaccine landscape and how we're going to innovate further and how India as a whole is going to be a vaccine superpower. Kirti, could you just kindly confirm if you can see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Great, I'll proceed. So thanks a lot, everyone, for having me again. It's truly an honor to be part of this webinar. Being the precursor speech to Dr. Sangeeta Reddy, who's a very good family friend of mine, it's intimidating, but it's a humbling experience as well. So thank you for having me. My name is Raches Ella. I head business development and advocacy at Bharat Biotech. And for the last 7 months or so, I've been also the project lead for our SARS-CoV-2 vaccines. Before I get into how India is going to become a vaccine superpower, I would just like to give you a brief update on what Bharat Biotech is all about. We're a vaccine manufacturing company based in Hyderabad, India. We're quite young for a vaccine company. We're around 25 years old. We boast about 16 different licensed vaccines. These are ranging from the pediatric to the adult cohort, geriatric as well. And we also have a few products in the biotherapeutic segment as well. All these products, just to give you some context, vaccines is, it's not a generic mind space. You can't make vaccines based on a generic approach. Each vaccine takes a minimum of 4 to 5 years to develop, an average of 10 years, a maximum of 20 years. So there's a lot of lead time towards making vaccines. As with regards to our R&D pipeline, as I head business development, this is always my favorite slide to display. We're a very innovative company. We're very R&D centric rather than manufacturing centric. We're working on various, I think 4 SARS-CoV-2 vaccines as we speak. One of which is in phase 2 clinical trials, which is called Covaxin. I'm sure you've heard in the media. We've also developed novel chikungunya and Zika vaccines by ourselves with our own R&D facilities. And we're also in late stage clinical development of various other cholera, non-typhoidal salmonella vaccines as well. So as we do our own R&D, we are also focused on doing our own clinical development. To date, we've done around 80 different human clinical trials spanning across 18 or so countries in around 100,000 adults, 600,000 volunteers, 500,000 newborn infants. It's a quite daunting task. We've done these trials all across the world, spanning from India to the UK, various countries in the African region, and as well as the US. To date, we supplied around 4 billion doses cumulatively over the last 20 years, and we plan to expand our territory markets as we move along. We are investing heavily in our manufacturing facilities to enter European and American markets as well. And as mentioned to you before, we're very R&D centric. We filed 427 patents, 140 of them have been granted. The first place we go to file our patent is China or America. That's how serious we are about our patents, and that's how seriously we uphold intellectual property right, not only of our IPR, but we also respect other manufacturing companies' IPR as well. And the vaccine landscape, it's nearly impossible to do it unilaterally. Collaborations are a must for any scientific project. Any pharmaceutical or vaccine project, collaborations is key. For various vaccines, we've partnered with several of these institutions highlighted on this display. So coming to the question of, is vaccine a super powerhouse? I mean, to give you a one-word answer, I would say yes, definitely we are. We have several leading vaccine companies in India. My colleagues from Pune Serum Institute, my colleagues from Hyderabad itself, IIL and Biological Advance, and a few other companies in India have put us on the map. We've been there for the last 15 to 20 years, and we plan to take it forward. To give you some context on vaccines and the ROI you get out of, you probably would not have heard about this. In fact, I was stumbled upon it when I read this article 4 years back. The best ROI you get is in vaccine spending. For every $1 spent on a vaccine, there's $16 recouped in terms of saving with healthcare costs, lost wages, and productivity due to illness. And if you compare that to preschool education, public health infra, various other government bonds, you can see it exceedingly overpasses the ROIs on those platforms. And to give you a sense of the vaccine landscape globally, I've broken it down to our global markets. We basically look at 5 various segments in our markets. UNICEF, which is a subdivision of the WHO, which is primarily catered towards providing healthcare to maternal and child healthcare. They are the largest procurer of vaccines. They procure vaccines in LMICs, which is low and middle income countries. They also procure for middle income countries, which are called MICs. Central and South America have their own pooled procurement agency. And as well, there are standalone middle income countries that procure vaccines. And of course, there are the high income countries such as USA, Australia, and the EU and Japan. So that's how you broadly classify the vaccine market segment. There are 2 big organizations, it's not a conglomerate, it's mostly like an association of pharmaceutical companies. The first being IFPMA. To be blunt, these are both basically multinational corporations based in either Europe, Japan, or America. And they not only provide pharmaceutical products, but also vaccine products. And the second one is quite newly formed. I think it's been there for the last 15 years. It's called DCVMN, Developing Countries Vaccine Manufacturers Network. It comprises of 41 manufacturers from 14 countries and territories. And please note, these are territories and countries from the developing world. So all of us have come together to form our own association as well, because in the coming slides, I'll explain to you the importance of this association. In terms of market volume, it's 3.5 billion doses per annum of vaccines. 90% of these vaccines are given to children as part of routine care. 50% of all vaccines are sold in Southeast Asia and in Africa. And our metric is to vaccinate infants born every year. There are approximately 75 million children born every year. 27 million of those reside in India. And Bill Gates, who's a very proponent advocate of vaccine delivery and vaccine innovation, has also quoted recently that India's pharma industry will be the supplier of COVID-19 vaccines, as we were with other pediatric and geriatric vaccines as well. So this definitely holds water, and we see good promise coming towards the future. But coming back to my point on stressing on DCVMN, which is this Developing Countries Vaccine Manufacturer Network, over the last years, we've changed the landscape of vaccines. If you look at the orange bars and the orange segment in the pie chart, you'll witness the contribution of the DCVMN manufacturers to the UNICEF procurement agency. So as mentioned to you before, UNICEF and Gavi, both of these organizations put together procure around 1.5 billion doses in the last 4 years. And 60% of those vaccines have come from developing country vaccine manufacturers networks, not from the MNCs. So that's definitely our contribution across all these developing countries. But this statistic is in fact more striking. This is the regional procurement by manufacturing type. This is a little bit detailed to mention where is India's vaccine manufacturing contribution based on the region of the world. As you can see, in every region of the world, India seems to be playing an important part. In fact, in various regions such as Africa, Southeast Asia, the Western Pacific, primarily we are the biggest suppliers of vaccine to governments and national immunization programs as well. But looking at this graph, one could say they're quite content with this. I'm not sure if you call it success. I'm in the vaccine industry, and to be honest, I would like to change this landscape even further. I feel there is a tremendous scope for improvement, and we're on our way there. It's just a matter of time. the reason why I'm a little pessimistic is because of this slide over here, which represents the vaccine-specific split. And as you can see here, the blue bars mention, the blue horizontal bars mention the DCVMN contribution, and the orange bars represent the IFPMA contribution, which is the Western manufacturers. And as you can see here, one could probably argue that they're quite content with India's and the developing country vaccine manufacturers' contribution. However, the blue bars I've highlighted, which is from our contribution, are vaccines that have been around for the last 15 to 20 years. We have a tough time innovating in India. We're trying to change that narrative. And with regards to these orange bars you see here, which is the contribution of the Western manufacturers, these are primarily newer generation vaccines that have been out there for the last 5 to 10 years. So I would say quite bluntly, our goal would be to make all of this blue. So how do we improve from here? We have a good platform we're on. We're already supplying 60% of the world's vaccine. How do we make that 60, 70, 80, 90? So as mentioned before, vaccine innovation and vaccine delivery requires a multifaceted approach. It's not only one vaccine company or a few vaccine companies can do it on their own. We require a lot of partnerships with public and private academia, national regulatories. We need to also help in increasing disease awareness. And there also needs to be some kind of push-pull funding mechanisms for not only the universities, but startup spin-off companies that try to work on vaccines, and as well large-scale manufacturers such as Bharat. So it's quite a complicated field right now, but I think there's scope for improvement. And in view of COVID, I feel things might change. I'm being very optimistic here, though. And this was quite interesting to me. I mean, this is from IISc, the Indian Institute of Science from Bangalore, and they started a spin-off company called Minvax, which is developing a COVID-19 vaccine. And they've recently applied for funding from BIRAC, which is a funding agency under the Department of Biotechnology, to develop their vaccine. And I feel we need to be hearing more and more of these stories like that. Of course, will Minvax be able to supply the volumes they need? No, not necessarily. But if they can at least develop their vaccine to a certain scale and then hand it over to a large-scale manufacturer, I feel that is the way to go. I feel these kind of companies should spin off from academia, and there should be a intertwined development process with academia and large-scale manufacturers. And another important point for innovating and being a powerhouse in vaccines is building internal disease burden data. India has been a country which quite frankly, have been quite poor with disease burden data, epidemiological studies. We need to improve on that. We need to understand how much of COVID-19 is really out there, how much of dengue is spreading every year on a seasonality. I'm sure you hear about hospital wards being filled with dengue and chikungunya and malaria during certain months of the year, but these things are never tabulated. These things are never written as publications or reports. And for that reason, we never really have concrete information. And without having this information, it doesn't percolate. It doesn't lead us to developing a vaccine for it. So I think there's a huge stress on disease burden, and I feel things could change in this current landscape. Another startling statistic I have to show here is the Ministry of Health's healthcare budget. This is quite a dated slide. I apologize for it. I wasn't able to get some recent data. But over the years, you could see that the healthcare budget has been increasing slightly. The sky blue vertical bars are suggesting that. However, the darker blue bars, 1.3%, 1.4%, hovers around that 1.5%, is the immunization budget. So that has remained stagnant, even though the number of children being born in India is higher, the number of diseases that are transmitting are higher. That immunization budget has been fairly stagnant for the last decade. So one proponent for us being a superpower house is that this budget needs to increase. If this budget increases, this will help vaccine manufacturers take on more risk, because we'll have a much better domestic market to cater to, which will allow us to take that risk in R&D and develop newer vaccines. And potentially it'll not only benefit India, but the rest of the world as well. Now I'll pivot back to Bharat Biotech because it's not fair on my part to talk about other vaccine manufacturers. I'd like to spend a couple of slides on what we've done in the past. We spent 20 years working on an oral rotavirus vaccine. Rotavirus is a disease which causes diarrhea in children of the ages 0 to 5 years of age. It's accounted for around 500,000 deaths worldwide and about 150,000 deaths in India annually. And we were the third company in the world to develop a rotavirus vaccine in collaboration with 16 various organizations. This is an example of the first social innovation project that is stemmed towards developing a vaccine. This whole process involved around 65 PhDs, 500 employees on various parts of these organizations, and a 20-year process. And with tremendous funding from not only the Ministry of Health, Government of India, but also the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, we were successfully able to license this vaccine in 2015. And it's now being given to every child born in India. So this is, I would say, one of the first first success stories, I would say, for a vaccine being born in India. Pivoting to COVID-19, we're taking this very seriously. We're an R&D centric company and we don't believe in contract manufacturing. There are advantages in licensing various MNCs vaccines and bringing it to India and supplying it for large volumes. But we take pride in our prowess to innovate at Bharat Biotech. And for those reasons, we've taken a separate approach to develop our own vaccines. Of course, these are in collaboration with various organizations. ICMR, the Indian Council of Medical Research, is one of them. And just how reports are there in the media and epidemiologists are saying there could be waves of COVID-19 vaccines. People are suggesting there is a second wave of COVID-19 vaccines in Europe. As vaccine manufacturers, we hypothesize there could be multiple waves of vaccines. That meaning there'll be a first generation COVID-19 vaccine and a second and a third generation of COVID-19 vaccine. I'm not trying to sound pessimistic by saying COVID-19 could be here for some time, but I'm trying to be as real as possible. It is a real concern and we must do our utmost best to mitigate this pandemic at once. And we're taking that very seriously with various generation of vaccines. With vaccine wave 1 is Covaxin in collaboration with ICMR. And as the vaccine candidates continue in our second and third waves, we add on to the advantages of our ICMR vaccine and we try to increase the scale, increase the immune response, better the safety profile. We do various other things to improve the vaccine. Therefore, with all these strategies coming into place, we're quite optimistic that we'll be able to curb this pandemic within a few years. Covaxin is a great moment for Bharat and the rest of the country, for India as well. It's the first indigenously developed COVID-19 vaccine. We've not tied up with any MNC or university abroad to do this. It's purely with our promoters and Dr. Balram Bhargav's vision to develop a Atmanirbhar COVID-19 vaccine. We embarked on this project about 6 months ago. And the progress has been great so far. We've been working hammer and tongs night and day. And I feel none of my colleagues at ICMR, at Bharat, and the Indian regulatory have even taken a holiday for the last 6 months, not even a weekend. Since April, we've completed preclinical toxicology studies. We've done monkey and hamster studies. We're the only vaccine to have done both of these studies. We've completed our phase 1 clinical trials. Our phase 2 human clinical trials is ongoing. And once, based on the outcome of our phase 2 clinical trials, we'll then move to our phase 3 clinical trials. We're the only company to have done a non-human primate challenge study. I don't want to get too scientific with you, but I'll just tell you that this is the first study ever done in India. We've taken 20 monkeys. We've vaccinated them with Covaxin. And 2 weeks later, we've actually challenged them, meaning we've given them live COVID into their nose and into their trachea, into their windpipe, to see if the vaccine is conferring protection. And alas, we were lucky and fortunate enough to develop a good, efficacious vaccine. All the monkeys were saved after they were challenged with COVID-19. With a very similar design, we did this in 40 hamsters, and we also noticed similar outcomes. Coming back to what we've done with typhoid, as you know, there's a lot of typhoid circulating in India, and Pakistan is, in fact, were able to detect extensively drug-resistant typhoid. We were able to successfully develop the world's first typhoid conjugate vaccine as well. It was successfully pre-qualified. We've done human challenge studies in Oxford University. You probably have heard of this human challenge concept. We were the first ones to do it in Oxford University. Similarly, the WHO and the Gates Foundation were able to license this vaccine for international availability. And the buck doesn't stop there. We're continuously evaluating this vaccine in several continents and trying to understand how well is this vaccine working. With regards to Zika virus vaccine as well, we were the first ones to file a patent. We were the first ones to procure the virus even before the Brazil outbreak, the Rio Olympic Games outbreak even took place. So I'm just owing to show that we stress heavily on our innovation. And I feel that's the only one way where we can become a vaccine superpower. It's only by innovating and beating the Western competition. And just showing you this last slide, the only way is to improve based on our academic and industry collaborations. As you can see here, the red boxes highlight the collaborations we've had with Indian organizations, be it government organizations or universities. Our goal should be together. We should try to make all of these organizations you see here totally Indian, and we should have domestic collaborations, more domestic collaborations rather than international collaborations. That's what I plan to stress here on. To summarize, India is already a vaccine superpower, rest assured, but there's tremendous scope of improvement. Not trying to sound like a pessimist, but in view of COVID-19, Western manufacturers and the Chinese have overpassed us and were quite slow to react. There is an impetus on newer vaccines rather than the generic vaccines. And the ultimate goal should be eradication of diseases, not demand forecasts, not supply chain scenarios, or not other MNCs. That's what we're trying to fight here, diseases. Public-private partnerships domestically is key. Manufacturing scales do exist in India. I've mentioned some fabulous companies based out of India that have the capacity to supply the world, not only India. That exists. And we just need to keep innovating, keep making new vaccines in this country with Indian support. With that, I would like to thank you for your time. And I'll be happy to answer any questions via email or post this conference. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ella. Thanks for understanding. And we're sure that Bharat Biotech, along with you, will take India to new heights in pharma industry.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.